Okay, here we go. So here's another episode of Tell Me About It. I'm your host, Eric, and today with me is Kirkland Hughes. Hi, Kirk.
Hey,
Welcome.
thank you very
And
much.
Kirk and I know each other. We actually played in a band together in Japan in like 2003. Um, so that's how we know each other. And Kirk and I were both teaching English in Japan at the time.
Hmm.
So welcome, Kirk, and we're gonna talk about that. Why don't I go ahead? I have a picture to share from back in the day. I got to figure out my screen share again of Kirk and I. The band was called Single Serving Jack, which I guess turned out to be a pretty appropriate name since we played one show.
Pretty much. Was it just one or was it two?
I
I,
I
I
think
think it
maybe it
might have.
was only one.
Yeah, yeah. You're right. I think it was just one and done. But we'd been rehearsing for quite a while before it, and then you were pretty much gone right after. I think back to America. I think
Yeah,
sometime.
yeah. Unfortunately, my time in Japan took an abrupt end right around that time.
Hmm.
But here's all of us, single serving Jack. You can see me and Kirk there on the left, and then Tom and John. And I actually played the drums at the time. Most people who know me now musically know me as a guitar player, but this was actually long before I'd ever played guitar in a band, and I was still playing drums. So it's kind of a blast from the past there. And then I'm gonna jump ahead here. This is a document I wrote while I was in Japan. It's the emails of all my experiences while I was there, but it also includes pictures of the band that I was in. And here we are actually playing I think our one show. And what I want to say Akihabara or something like that.
Oh, so
What
that
was
was
what was the
that was a
neighborhood?
neighborhood of Tokyo called Akasaka. It was a very sort of downtownish commercial center, a lot of restaurants and clubs. So, yeah.
Yeah. So we may get more into music later, but for now, I want to talk more about kind of Kirk's experience while in Japan. And why don't we start with, can you recall what was the first time that you ever really thought of teaching in Japan as something that you might actually do? Like, how did that come up? And then why did you decide to go? Like, what kicked off this trip for you in the first place?
Well, a lot of it came from meeting my girlfriend back then, who was from Japan, and the very same girlfriend who's my wife today, some 20 years later. But I met her in my last year of university, and I was working at an English school in Mississauga, Canada, and that's where I met her. And we got to know each other. And at the time, I was, close to graduating, and I didn't really want to pursue a career in the field in the with a diploma that I pretty much worked for the last 4 years. But I also had no idea what I really wanted to do with my life. And so, along came my girlfriend, and I'm half Japanese. I had been to Japan before, but I never really got a chance to explore it or really understand what life was like there. And to a certain extent, my wife's suggestion, why not just go live in Japan for a couple of years, teach English, and maybe I'll find out what I want to do with myself there. And I had absolutely nothing else I could think of that I wanted to do here back in Canada. So yeah, as soon as I graduated, I up and left Canada and went straight to Tokyo in September 2020 or 2000. So yeah.
And I should mention, because I forgot to mention in the intro that you live in Toronto now. You are Canadian.
Mhm.
For our
Born in
viewers
Canada.
who will probably assume that you live somewhere near me, but that's not the case. So after college, you went to Tokyo with your then girlfriend. Did you go to like where her family was in Japan? Was that kind of the plan?
No, my wife's family lives in Koriyama in Fukushima, kind of actually close to where that nuclear plant exploded.
So up north.
But yeah, but she had been so when she came back to Japan after her study in Canada, she needed to finish her last year of university, and she was studying in Tokyo at the time. So that's pretty much where we settled. When I moved over there, I lived in a in a prefecture called Saitama, which is pretty much right next to Tokyo, as you might remember.
Hmm.
And so we were in pretty much in Tokyo right off the bat. Yeah.
So how did the job come about? How did you figure that part of it out?
Yeah, that was, I think at the time, even though I had no idea what I wanted to do, I was at least, when the idea was planned, I had to go to Japan. I was at least smart enough to try to figure out, there was actually a Nova English school recruitment office in Toronto.
Hmm.
And they were sort of like my only hope to get me to Tokyo, to make sure I had something to do there that would make me money while I was there. So yeah, it was very fast. It was very quick. I pretty much went to their office downtown Toronto, had a quick interview, and I think just a couple weeks later they were firing me off on a plane. And yeah, I hooked up with my wife soon afterwards and got set up really, really quickly. So yeah, it was actually fantastic. It was great. It was a
So you,
very smooth transition.
so you worked for Nova.
I worked for Nova for about 6 or 7 months after I landed, and then I moved on to a company that I thought was a little bit better. I went Berlitz basically for the next year and a half.
Berlitz, yeah. Nova was where I worked, and I did research Berlitz and saw that they did seem to be a little bit better, but I they weren't the one that got back to me, so I just went with Nova.
Yeah, I should say, I mean, I had a great time at Nova, but I was just having a great time just being in Japan doing anything, especially for a guy again who was clueless. He didn't really want to like get a job back in Canada and start like living like an adult life at the time. I was really having too much fun. But yeah, Berlitz was a little bit looser. You actually had weekends and holidays off and stuff. And Nova was a little bit more work oriented. So that's why I switched over. Yeah.
Now you say that you had been to Japan before, so you kind of had some idea what Japan was like, but did you have any sort of like, I don't know, what was it like when you first got there? Was it different than what you had thought from your experiences before? Were you like having any sort of culture shock, or I don't know, what was the experience of kind of uprooting yourself?
Yeah, it was really exciting and scary. And still a sense of like going into the unknown, even though I had been there twice. But that was when I was younger, like 14 and 16 with my mom, traveling to visit her mother there and meeting extended family. So I always knew like those trips I was going back because I just resumed my typical Canadian life. But yeah, back then in 2000 when I lived there and moved there, that was definitely a culture shock, not a bad one, but just like a pure exciting one, to get a sense of what it's like to actually live in like a brand new country that was like very much the opposite of what Canada was. And Canada's pretty sheltered, a lot of fun. It's a great country, of course, and, very safe and fun, but definitely not as exciting as like living in Tokyo and just living in a place where you can't communicate as easily with everybody. So from that standpoint, it was tough, but it was nothing but positive. It was fantastic.
Now I can remember, so I was there in 2003, and by that point, your Japanese was already getting pretty good.
Hmm.
Did you continue to improve?
No, I'd say actually 2003 was pretty
Was the
much the
peak?
pinnacle. Yeah, it no, legitimately was. Because 2000, when I first arrived 2000 and 2001, I for the first 2 years I just worked at Eikaiwas, English conversation schools, and saved money. And then that last year, I think that when we had met, I just quit. So that I took all the money that I saved and I enrolled in a Japanese language program at a university there. And for the last year that I was there, which was when you were there, I was just studying Japanese, and I got pretty good enough to finish one of the higher proficiency tests. But yet after that, I went back to Canada for a brief year and pretty much lost it all there. And
Yeah,
yeah, today it's decent survival level, but I don't think I can converse with anybody
yeah.
all that much. Yeah.
And could you walk us through what it's like to teach English in Japan? I think for a lot of people watching, they have no idea like what a language school is even like. Um,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
was that like?
Speaking from my own experience as I guess a 22-year-old, starting off, it was a bit scary. It was kind of like my first real job, where in the sense that I'd be working like 8 hours, which turned out to like be like 10, per day. It was very intense, and it's not the kind of English conversation school isn't where you'd be teaching like 30 people in one class. You're teaching mostly adults, some kids, depending on which branch you landed around the city or country. But it's like you'd be seeing like groups of 1 to 4 and teaching 8 classes a day, and different subjects, different levels, different ways to teach, and depending on how really into it you were, it could be really rewarding, or it could be sort of it could be a bit drudgery at the same time.
Hmm.
Um, and but I always find it pretty exciting. It definitely, as a naturally introverted person myself, who I think at the time really didn't have, you know, all that great presentation skills, or I think I realized my first year that I was just utter shit at like actually explaining stuff or teaching stuff. So I had to learn pretty fast at Nova and then Berlitz. And yeah, it was a real, throw yourself right into the fire, and there's some training there, I guess, but you are kind of, I think, you know, right into it right off the bat, and all you could do is just learn and have as much fun as possible doing it, and hopefully teach them something at the same time while doing all of that. So it was a great experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we played in a band together. Was making music in Japan kind of part of your plan when you went there, or how did it even come about that you decided to form a musical project?
Yeah, I don't. Is it? Was the story? Was it that Metropolis magazine? Is that how we found each other? Is that, I can't. Maybe I answered one of your ads, or you
No,
answered
I,
one of
I think
mine.
I answered your ad, and you already knew the other guys.
Right, right. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I had actually, I had played in a band with a roommate before I had met you, so that was kind of already rolling in the sense that hey, I mean, my roommate was a drummer, and I was a guitarist, and he wanted to find a place where he could play acoustic drum kits, because since you can't in your typical tiny Japanese apartment. And then we found these really great rent by the hour, fully equipped rehearsal studios.
Which is a great
Oh,
thing that they have in Japan. I wish they
oh,
had that here.
it's fantastic. And we found a couple like right by ourselves. And then, the great thing about English teaching is you're with other sort of foreigners and expats and a lot of them are also bound to be very musical as well. So, ironically, it can be a grind trying to find like musicians to play with here in Toronto, and maybe over there in Portland and Seattle too. But in Tokyo, I found it really, really easy. And, so I think I played with those guys for about a year before I met you. And but then I think it was really just the desire to play music. To answer your question, was just like a desire to do something different, because it's like you can, I guess depending on the stuff you like to do in your night and on your nights after you finish your like 9 o'clock p.m. last lesson, and you can drink 5 to 7 nights a week so easily there. And I certainly did that, and got drunk and pissed off with all my friends. But
That's
sooner or
kind of
later, you
part
just
of
want
the
to do something
culture.
different, right? Exactly, yeah. And so when we discovered like these hourly rental rehearsal studios, my drummer Dom and I hit them up and just started. Well, let's form a band. Let's do stuff. And it was basically the same situation with you when I moved to a different area to move in with my girlfriend at the time. Yeah, I just wanted to find a new band, and it was more just to do something different other than drinking, but just to
Yeah.
have some fun and a different way to hang out with some friends. So yeah.
And for those who don't know, I mean, these rehearsal spaces that were not very expensive, they came with a PA, they came with amps, they came with very decent drum sets all ready to go.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how we would have even been able to do a project, be a band
I
without
don't
that
think we could have. Yeah.
available.
Oh, for sure, for
The
sure.
drums would have been impossible.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, considering like how dense and crowded Tokyo was, the way houses were set up, there were no basements or garages where you could set up your typical equipment needed to play. So these
Right.
places were essential.
Yeah.
And I think they're definitely the lifeline for like I mean, Tokyo's got such an amazing music scene with like I'm gonna estimate 40, 50,000 bands or something like that, you know and there's nowhere else to go but these places. So Yeah, they were great,
And I
essential.
don't remember them being very expensive. I mean, per person, what were we paying? Probably the equivalent of like $5 or $10, maybe.
That's what I'm guessing. Maybe even less, depending on which studio you went to. But yeah, yeah, maybe they were, yeah, very comfortable, very clean. The Japanese have a reputation for taking care of everything as much as possible. There weren't like these ratty rooms with everything falling apart that you might find here in Toronto. But yeah, it was a great environment. Great environment.
Yeah, I imagine if they tried to do that here in the States, it's like nothing would work. Like the amps would be all rattly. Like the drum set would just be like a complete disaster with like broken
Yeah,
heads. Like it just wouldn't have been like it was there.
stuff will get stolen, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have a few good rent by the hour studios here in Toronto, I should say. But yeah, the ones in Tokyo were top notch. Yeah.
So how much longer? So I left in 2003. Sounds like maybe you didn't stay in Japan that much longer.
Well, I think by then in 2003, after I finished my Japanese studies, I decided to go back to see what I could do in Canada. And so I went back for about a year or so, splitting time 2003 to 2004. And even then, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do by the end of my trip in Japan. But I went back anyways, and I left my girlfriend for about a year, and it didn't really work out in Mississauga, Toronto. So after a year of sort of just bouncing around from like not so good jobs, still not really wanting to figure out what I wanted to do there, I realized that I was having a blast in Japan. Maybe I'll take a second shot and see what I could do. So I went back after another year in 2004. I went back to Japan and ended up staying all the way to 2009.
Wow.
Hmm.
And then in 2009, you went back to Toronto, and you've been there ever since.
Pretty much, yeah, yep, since 2009. Yeah,
I had a
2009 it stopped.
similar.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was able to finally find something. So yeah.
I had a similar, experience where, I was a few years out of college, didn't know what I wanted to do, went there hoping to find some path, and then just like you, I came home having not figured anything out. I mean, I
Yeah.
had a good time while I was there, but I didn't come home having like any more idea what I wanted to do than I did when I left.
Hmm.
And I really thought I was gonna like totally find my path in life while I was there. And unfortunately it didn't work out that way.
I think I remember. Yeah, actually, I think I remember you mentioning after you got back, you actually started train hopping again, right? For a while.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I eventually decided to kind of get or actually get started in what I got my degree in, which was television production. And then I worked in television news for about 3 years
Right.
before I got kind of tired of that.
Right.
Um,
Right. It was grant writing afterwards too. Then I think wasn't it?
yeah, which I'm still doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean, it sounds like my next question was going to be kind of what was your I don't know, I guess you're like your main takeaway from your time in Japan, or how did your time in Japan kind of like alter the course of your life? I was thinking that you met your wife in Japan, but since you had already met her, so that would have happened sort of regardless. But I don't know, like can you talk a little bit about how you think your experiences in Japan may have changed your course in some way, or if you think it did?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Definitely did. That's how I might be able to articulate. Well, I just learned how to do a lot of things, like how to communicate better, generally speaking. Um, maybe one of the bigger things, I talked about this with my wife quite a bit and with friends, but, you know, uh, when you're an English teacher in Japan, I feel like it's sort of easy to kind of get stuck as one. I certainly met a lot of people who kind of grew cynical and jaded because they spent a long time trying to figure out what they wanted to do in life and maybe they just never did.
So they
So they
just
just
stayed there?
yeah. And to a certain extent, I felt like I was sort of getting the same way, at least the first 2 years that I was doing it. And maybe the first year that when I came back to English teach as well, 2004, for lack of any other choice. And it's it's kind of ironic since I'm Asian myself and half Japanese, but pretty much grew up Canadian, speaking only English with decent Japanese at the time, but still foreign as could be. It's the ironic thing me saying this is that you see like anywhere from 4 to 30 students a day, 5 days a week, 5, 6 days a week. I was working 6 days in a row sometimes. And, you sort of get to, they all become a blur. And it really makes it hard to distinguish, that old racist stereotype, all Asians sort of look alike kind of thing, right? And I was sort of getting disillusioned with it, that my second trip around there for the first year, just teaching same thing, going through the motions. And, it really it took a while. I could sort of feel myself getting the same little bit of jadedness too that I thought some of the older 40, 50, 60-year-old teachers I saw who had been there for so many decades doing the same thing. And I wonder how they could have done it. And I sort of got a little bit depressed thinking that could happen to me. But, it took a really cool couple of teachers that I had met to sort of get me feeling more positive and optimistic, and got me to reframe how I thought about my interactions with people, and how to really, focus on the students themselves and get more out of them. Not so much as far as like being able to get them to speak English, but just as far as myself to like find a way to kind of connect with them, and realize that it's not just about your jaded teacher asking them about what did you do on your vacation and what is your favorite hobby, and the same thing that a lot of teachers just retread because they have nothing interesting to say. They don't even really care to learn what the student in front of them is actually all about. So I think I got better at it. I found ways to connect, through English teaching. And I started realizing and noticing like those little eureka moments that students would have. And when the focus of my lessons admittedly kind of got off whatever the lesson was talking about, and whatever grammar point we were talking about, or whatever boring hobby, or that you've talked about for 1,000, 10,000 times before, started talking about what their job was, all the technical stuff that they were doing, the musicians, the guys, like the stuffy CEO of a company who turned out to be an amazing jazz guitarist, who introduced me to like the Shinjuku Pit-In Jazz Club, this famous place, or who took me to STB behind the school that was there where I was working, and I didn't realize for the first 2 years. I really learned to connect and see like beyond the dark brown eyes and black hair of your typical Japanese student in person, and just really opened up a whole world of Japan that I never could have gotten if I never had really made an attempt to really understand them, and get them to know each other, get to know them more, right? So, I really, Tokyo just opened up a lot more. So many great restaurants and food and talking points, and realized like actual certain takes on positions that we Westerners might think Japanese think about, which turn out to be the opposite. Their views on a lot of controversial topics like history and stuff. They have a lot of thoughts about it, but I got the impression that we sometimes think that they don't, but it's not that. It's just that they just don't communicate with it, whether it's their English level, or whether it's because they don't feel like foreigners really feel like they want to know what they really think. So I think the takeaway of that is that I think I just became a lot more interested in people, kind of like what you're doing with your podcast here. Everybody's got an interesting story to tell, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I got much better as a conversationalist. I think I got a lot better at, asking questions beyond your typical small talk pleasantries. I definitely, presentation skills got a lot better. I was able to articulate my own thoughts a lot more. And yeah, I just feel like it made me a lot more interested in the world, and it applied to, what applied to like how I talk to people here in Toronto as well. And, all of the expat friends who came from like England and UK and Australia and other countries got me way more curious about where they came from. And I definitely visited them in their own countries as well. So, Japan, for such a, perceived closed country, actually really ended up opening my own thoughts and my own attitudes towards things, and sort of became, more open to things myself than I might have normally been if I just stayed in Canada, which is very ironic to me. Canada's a very diverse, open country, but it took me going to Japan with the stoic, reserved, typical Japanese person, and learning how to talk to them and connect with them more to sort of, open my mind to a lot of things. So that's definitely my biggest takeaway.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear what you're saying about. I definitely was very conscious of like not wanting to become, like some of the long, the old timers who were in Japan who like
Yeah.
complained about Japan. And
Stuck, cynical. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I went to Japan because I really wanted to enjoy the experience and really see the country. And I felt like, um, when it wasn't that for me anymore was kind of when I decided that I needed to go. I mean,
Yeah.
at the time that I left, I kind of felt like I was about to cross that line from just like,
Hmm.
wow, everything in Japan is so amazing and new and interesting to being to kind of feeling like it was a drag. And I
Yeah.
didn't I didn't want that to ever be my experience because then I mean for me, I wasn't doing it because like I needed the job. I mean, it was just kind of just something to do. And so I
Right.
sort
Yeah.
of felt like if I was getting to that point, then it was time to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Ironically, to kind of maintain your appreciation of Japan, you had to leave it, right? And
Yeah.
that's definitely definitely is the smart choice for sure. Yeah. So yeah.
Although I had this anxiety while I was there, I felt like I wanted to try to see as much of Japan as I could while I was there. And, I was afraid that I was going to miss something.
Hmm.
And of course I did. I mean, how are you going to see like an entire country in a year? I mean, even
Yeah.
now there's things that I find out now exist in Japan that I didn't see. And I'm like, oh, why didn't I go there? And I had such anxiety about that at the time.
Right.
I didn't want
Right.
to miss anything. But, I guess I just realized that you can't see it all. And I was kind of surprised. I mean, I guess this just kind of shows my naive thinking at the time. But I thought that I was going to leave Japan like just being like an expert on Japanese culture and like I would just like know everything about Japan in and out and I would totally understand like the Japanese mindset inside and out. And of course that wasn't the case at all. But then I realized I'm not sure I even have that about America. And I've lived here my whole life. It's like how can you really like
Yeah.
fully understand anywhere? So I
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
had unrealistic expectations for how much understanding I would gain while there. I don't know if you had a similar experience.
Oh, yeah, I think so too. Maybe there was like even a little bit more pressure on myself being half Japanese, and realizing I know next to nothing as much as your other standard Western Canadian American and visitor there. But I totally get what you mean. I totally get what you mean. Like even though I lived there for maybe 6, 7, 8 years longer than you had, and was probably as in deep and involved as much as possible. Even then, there's still so much that I just don't understand and never will. Um, so maybe it's not so much like the about seeking to have like that perfect understanding of Japan and Japanese people, but it's just like just coming away with it with a greater appreciation for them and how they live their life. And it's a nice frame to have, especially when you compare the things that we have to deal with or the things that we appreciate here in America, and to understand how they live their life over there, very different and very alien. It's a good reminder that to sort of just appreciate differences in all cultures as they exist here. Because I guess Portland and West Coast over there is pretty diverse as it is here in Toronto. So it's I think we just have a more balanced outlook to life, maybe not in a full complete understanding, but a certain more balanced appreciation for the world beyond what we see over here in Toronto and in Portland, having lived over there. Right?
Well, and it's like the thing you always hear is that like you have to leave your home country to understand it better. Like
Yeah,
when you have
yeah,
something else to compare it to. I mean, I certainly had that experience.
right, right, right. Which is definitely the biggest reward, I reckon. Yeah, yeah.
So, what would you say were your favorite things about Japan?
Um, well, I could say like the normal things, like the food was always fantastic,
Love the
transportation
food.
was great, even though it was crowded, it's crazy. But maybe to get into like maybe some uniquer things that maybe people, well, Tokyo in particular, man, it's huge metropolis. What did I say? 13 million people living there, 18 million
It's
people during the
by
day
some
when it swells
estimates
up.
the biggest city in the world.
Yeah. and it's just a sprawl, right? But one of my favorite things about it, whenever I travel anywhere, I always love walking around and just exploring. And I love exploring urban cities. You know, as much as I love parks, even though I don't get a chance to go out and walk, hike in a forest or something. I will always like prefer to like walk around in the city and explore and happen upon some cool cafe or some restaurant or something like that, or meet some people. But I think one of my favorite things about Tokyo in particular was just like it's so huge, but it's so dense, and there's like probably like 100 people around you at any given time, and yet they're just not there at the same time. It's weird how a city can be so densely populated and you could feel happily alone at the same time and never bothered, and it's quiet, like, and it's peaceful. It's like 1,000 people in a 100 square meter area, and you won't get bothered. You can just go about your day and do nothing, and just veg out. you know like, the great thing of why Tokyo is such a great city to walk around in is that streets can be busy, clogged with traffic and stuff, but then there are these awesome little pockets of tranquility, these mini shrines,
Yeah,
mini
there's always like
temples that you
little
could just stumble
micro
on.
neighborhoods.
Yeah, exactly. And each neighborhood has like its own little mini downtown and its own mini culture. And one neighborhood is known for its music scene. Like Kagurazaka has a fantastic punk music scene, but then you go over to Shimokitazawa, a little bit more artsy with a more of an artsy music scene, and then you go to Akasaka where all the jazz clubs are. It's like the entire city of Tokyo is huge, but it's like living in like 30 different cities, each with its own character in and of itself. And so that dynamic was just a fantastic place to live in, and the energy is always great. So that was definitely my favorite part.
Yeah. All right. Well, sounds good. I want to give you a chance before we sign off here to talk a little bit about music projects you got going on right now. I listened to your new instrumental album today. I think that sounds awesome.
Much obliged. Yeah. Well, four of the songs out of there actually came from those days living in Japan. They were like written in my tiny living room in Toritsu Daigaku for the most part. I think the one song, that Ego You song, I think I might have actually played it for you right before you left. I don't know if you remember that heavy punk song thing. But yeah, so I just released an EP of instrumentals. It was really just like a sort of a refreshing of all the crappy crappy demo versions that I recorded of them from 2004 to 2007. And they were always something that I always wanted to revisit, especially as I got a little bit better and a little bit more knowledgeable about the recording process and the mixing and mastering process. And I don't know why. I guess I started on it like maybe 2-3 years ago. Started refreshing the tracks, finding people to help me record like the drums and the violins and strings. And yeah, so I was going for like instrumental. I'm gonna maybe see if I can get 2 or 3 of them placed in like you know more of a cinematic approach. Maybe I can get them placed in like a TV show or a movie if I can get them noticed. But I know the chances are low. But you know, it's just a really fun, nostalgic, but new thing to kind of work on. And for the sheer fun of it, it's out, and yeah, I'm pretty proud of it.
And where can people find this?
I guess the best place would be at my own website, www.daybreakwisdom.com, daybreakwisdom.com. You could actually purchase a copy of it directly from myself or from that site. But you can also listen to it on Spotify, Bandcamp, Deezer, pretty much all the usual streaming platforms, iTunes, Apple Music. Yeah,
All right, I'm
all
going to
there.
see if I can pull this off without making a disaster out of it. So here's the Bandcamp page. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. Yep.
Okay, I wanted to play one song before we sign off here, and I was thinking I was gonna go with Ego You because that one really shows off your guitar talents
Oh, cool.
on that one.
Uh,
And I will say you were a great guitarist back in the day, but not surprisingly, almost 20 years later, that you've even improved, which I would expect after all this time, unless you hadn't been playing at all. Oh no! Oh no! Now it wants me to pay for it. Oh no! It is playing it. Can you hear it?
yep, I can hear it.
got the chill intro, but then it starts rocking.
This is my ballroom dance concept.
I think this part was very like Queens of the Stone Age.
Sorry?
Very like Queens of the Stone Age here.
Josh Owen.
Woo! Now that's how you end a song. All right.
That one was a fun one. I
Yeah.
realized I actually had a video of me on YouTube and my friend Kevin and James and Wayne working on it. I should have sent you that link because then you could have seen us play that thing. So, but
Man,
yeah,
those guitar strings must have been smoking on some of those parts. You were really going.
I think my arthritis was flaming up though. That's actually what was happening.
So
My
definitely,
fingers are all fat at 40.
everyone check out Daybreak Wisdom. Just came out today, so hot off the presses. Kirk, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story.
Yeah, I appreciate the talk. It was fun recollecting all that.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Have a good one.